Imam Malik ibn Anas, rahimahullah, the Imam of Medina, the famous Imam of Hadith, the way he would relate Hadith, when he would relate Hadith, people would gather and they'd sit outside in the gathering. And he would be at home, he would bathe, he would do ghusl, he would dress in his best clothes, then he would come out. And before his arrival, he would instruct that the whole area would be fragranced with bukhoor and aloe wood, which we refer to as oud and agar wood. This would be burnt in that whole area, around the whole gathering. And then, when everything was fumigated and fragranced, Imam Malik ibn Anas would come out with great waqar, with great self-composure and dignity. Imam Malik rahimahullah would hardly ever joke or laugh. Never. Never. He was a man of great seriousness, and he was revered. And he says, when he started teaching, remember, his teachers were the tabi'een, they were the successors to the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum. He says, I did not sit to teach and to begin giving fatwa. This also refers to the beginning of the verse. What did we learn? O believers, do not forward yourselves, do not advance, do not place yourselves ahead of, do not be forward in the presence of Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, do not speak without knowledge. So Imam Malik ibn Anas rahimahullah says, I did not begin giving fatwa, I did not begin answering questions of religion, and I did not sit down to teach until 70 of my leading mashayikh and teachers of Medina granted me permission to do so. 70. And not just 70 individuals, 70 of the leading mashayikh and tabi'een, successors of the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum and their students, they granted him permission to do so. And he was a man of great waqar, composure. He would hardly ever laugh, never joke, hardly ever joke. And when it came to the hadith, he showed immense respect. This is how he would prepare himself. In fact, Imam Malik would hardly ever teach much. He'd sit down and the students would read hadith to him and he'd listen. That's all he would do, he'd listen, occasionally commenting here and there. Once he was walking and someone asked him a question about hadith whilst he was walking. They were walking and he asked him a question about hadith. Imam Malik actually turned around and slapped him. He slapped him and he said, how dare you ask me a question about hadith in such a casual manner whilst walking? This should be done respectfully in a gathering, with dignity, with etiquette, with decorum. There's a hadith, there's a narration in the Muwatta of Imam Malik that if someone calls someone a donkey, he is to be punished. So it's a narration of Muwatta. So someone asked Imam Malik that, what's the punishment if someone calls another a donkey? So he mentioned the punishment narrated in his Muwatta. Then the man asked that, what's the punishment if someone calls another a horse? Now, we may not really understand this, but in certain cultures, like in the Asian culture, the poor donkey is reviled. So if you really want to disparage someone, you call them a donkey. Gada, kota, and in Arabic, himar. So, but we may not understand it in English so much, but in Arab culture, in Asian culture, it's true. So if someone calls another a donkey, he is to be punished. So Imam Malik mentioned the punishment. Then the same question I asked him, and what about if someone calls someone a horse? Imam Malik got angry and he said, you should be punished. Does anyone call someone a horse merely to tease them or abuse them? Again, respect for knowledge, respect for the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the ulama say, do not raise your voices over the voice of the messenger, over the speech of the messenger. That means a hadith. Of course, not to that degree. Just as Allah says, when the Quran is recited, listen to it attentively. And just as Allah quotes the Quraysh, the unbelievers at the time, what did they say? وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَا تَسْمَعُوا لِهَذَا الْقُرْآنِ وَالْغَوْا فِيهِ. That, they would tell one another, do not listen to the Qur'an. وَالْغَوْا فِيهِ, and cause disruption therein. So if someone's reciting the Qur'an, create some din and noise and cause disruption. So although we can't do it to that degree, we can never elevate the hadith to the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But undoubtedly they come after the words of Allah. The speech of the messenger comes after the speech of Allah. Respect for the speech of the messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes immediately after respect to the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to learn how to respect the hadith of the messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just as we supposedly respect the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.